Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 61. And before we get into today's episode, let me just tell you about our website, camerashakepodcast.com. If you get a minute, head over there and hit the join the community button. That way you can join our community, obviously. And I promise we won't bombard you with weekly newsletters, but we will be able to tell you when new things happen. So hit that up, sign up. If you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, head over to YouTube where you can see us in full Technicolor, and do us a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, all of the good stuff that YouTubers usually tell you to do. That would be great. Now, if you are, however, on Apple iTunes or something like that and listen to the audio version, you could just give us a little review, hit the little star thingy thing, and that would help us being found more easily. Now, that being said, let's get straight into it. This is Camera Shake Podcast, episode 61. And today we have another special guest. It's none other than New York City-based portrait and commercial photographer, Educator, the face of Adorama TV, t-shirt collector, self-proclaimed lighting guru, and the only photographer I know that has his own Muppet. Please give it up to none other than Mr. Daniel Norton himself. Daniel, how are you?
I'm good. It is true. I think I'm the only photographer that has. But I get asked all the time where it came from.
Yeah,
and,
man.
It's a secret. No.
Oh, come on. No. You can't do that.
No, actually, there was this guy, oh God, if I can remember his name now, but his company is called Fuzzhead Puppets. Right. And one of the guys that was working with me in Adorama was like, "Oh, we should do a video where we're all Muppet characters." And so I reached out and I said, what would this cost? And we had one made. Unfortunately, it wasn't inexpensive, so the budget only. I mean, everybody thinks I'm just a prima donna, so I only wanted me. But the plan was to get also Dave, who was also in the videos a lot back then, as a puppet as well. But we never had a chance to do that because of budget constraints. But it's really fun, and it's fun to break it out and use once in a while. Yeah.
Do you actually do you have the Muppet?
Oh yeah, I have it. Oh, you want to see it?
Yeah.
Tell me it's right by your side.
Hey there.
Wicked.
It's really funny to do it because I'm like, all right, here we go. And I start talking and Fernando's like, okay, so I'm talking. It's like I can't even do it as well as he does it. And then the hands can move around and stuff.
Wicked.
Yeah.
Does he have legs?
No, you can get legs for him, but I didn't get legs with this guy. So that's why it's so funny when we try to use them because you're like, you do it stuff and you're like, oh, hold on. So you got to be careful. So he's a half. But you can just get legs. Like you can just buy them. You don't need them custom made. They're just like a thing that go on the bottom. They just kind of flip to the front.
Right.
Yeah.
You just need to match the skin color, I guess. But yeah, he did a great job with it. I didn't, I don't know where they are, else I'd dig on my computer, but the original drawings, I have them somewhere. They're so funny. He's like, I guess the eyebrows were different and the nose was different in each one. Like he did a few different noses. So,
right. Was this like a complicated process to have that Muppet made, or was it just a matter of like sending them a photo or something?
It was really kind of interesting. He asked for several photos, which I sent. And then he's like, well, how do you normally, do you shave every day? Do you do this? Because he wanted to figure out how to do it. And then he did a bunch of drawings. And mostly the changes were the eyebrows. He was like, all right, well, this one, your eyebrows are like this. And once I picked one that I liked, he started making it and just sent me the process as we went. He did. It actually has my tattoo. I don't think it's a tattoo here.
Yeah,
he drew it on there on the arm. It's pretty well done. I mean, he did not. He wasn't skimping and messing around. He's a really good guy.
I'm amazed at the sticking point were the eyebrows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? That was the thing. Well,
So what would my eyebrows be like for a Muppet? Come on, describe it.
I don't know. I wonder whether it would be the eyebrows that would be the sticking point with you.
What do you mean? One eyebrow up or one eyebrow?
Right, you never know what's going to be that thing, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the eyebrows, that was the thing.
But that's, I think, that is like, I think you've reached the pinnacle of fame once you've had your own Muppet made.
Damn straight.
Yeah, right?
I'm trying to hit all media forms because at one point Adorama it was very short-lived. They had actually like a comic strip too that I was in. That was really fun too. So I've been a comic as well, but that didn't live very long. It was only maybe like 4 or 5 of them, but they were fun.
Yeah. Because you've been you've been doing the Adorama thing for a long time.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah. We probably, I would say close to 10 years, probably 8 or 9 years. Yeah.
Wow.
And I didn't want to do it, which is the funniest thing. I tell people that a lot. You don't never know what's going to happen in life. I was working there. They brought me in. They wanted a pro photographer. They were like, we need somebody that can be there when pros come in to talk to them. That was their idea. They're like, we don't want, we have salesmen, whatever, but that can sell stuff. We want somebody when a pro comes in to be like, hey, I have this project. Like, what? I don't know what to do, or what do you think? So that was my job. I was like an advisor, and Annie, who was there, Annie Cahill, she was like, oh, I love to just watch you explain how the lighting is. We should videotape you doing it. I was like, no. I'm like, I'm on the other side of the camera. And she convinced me to do it. And, one thing led to another. And here I am. And this is pretty much what I do. So I enjoy it,
Yeah.
But it was I would have never thought that if you asked me 10 years ago, oh, you're going to be doing YouTube videos. I would have never thought that. Yeah.
And it sort of expanded as well, quite dramatically, I think, because originally it was only you, right? In the very beginning.
Well, right. So Mark Wallace actually started Adorama TV. He was the first guy, and he was the main guy. And then they brought in different hosts, but they were kind of scattered, which they still are. I think that's one of the strengths of the channel is that they've got a lot of hosts all over the world. But when they needed something done quickly, they brought me in to do all the local stuff. So I became like, whenever they needed something. So I was doing, a camera review or this new thing or something going on. And that became kind of like, like a face, like I was there all the time. That's kind of it. Yeah. The channel is huge now. I think when I first started on there, there was like 300,000 and now they're over 1 million. So yeah.
Yes, we had Mark on the show a few months ago as well, which was hilarious because he was like, I don't remember. Was he in Bolivia or something or? Wherever he was at the time.
Yeah.
Could be anywhere.
Riding a motorcycle while he was talking to you.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was mid shift, wasn't he, at the time?
Well, he was pretty much stuck because of COVID,
That's
and
right.
everything else.
He
couldn't really travel. So that was hilarious.
He's in what he considers his hometown, right? At the minute. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, Mark's pretty awesome. Whenever he comes to New York, we hang out. He's a great guy. So.
Yeah. He was on. I think he was having to leave, and he was like practically back on his way to the United States. Because his visa has been cut short or whatever it was.
Right. Yeah, because I remember he said he's like, well, I can't leave, but at some point I have to leave because the visa is going to end or whatever. So for a while he was stuck in a hotel, which was. I've been very lucky. I don't, even though I work out of Manhattan, I live like north of the city in kind of like a small town. So like I have a backyard and things. So, during the lockdown, I could walk outside and do things. But Mark was basically trapped. So,
because I was going to ask you how that whole thing unfolded for you, because I know your studio's in like the middle of Manhattan, pretty much.
Yeah, I had gone to WPPI, which is the convention here in the States in Las Vegas, and like right before it. And when the lockdown happened, like a week later, and I just had at my house like a few speed lights and basic stuff. But luckily, I shoot the videos ahead of time, so I had a little bit of time. And at first, who knew how long it was going to last, right? And we were like, well, we'll probably have enough content. But then it started moving forward, and I had to stop doing the live streams. And I did a few from my house. Which is the basic equipment I had. And I actually ended up making some videos where I just shot some self-portraits. You got to stay busy. So, but what I mostly did during the lockdown was on my channel, I was like almost vlogging because I was doing short videos like every day just to kind of keep myself sane and just kind of communicate with people out there, So, which is good because, when you're kind of off by yourself, sometimes it can be hard. Even though I had the woods and the things I could take walks, it was like you're still alone, in a sense. So it was good to like have the community to kind of bounce off. Yeah.
We were in a similar situation in the sense that, over here in the UK, everything just locked down completely. We were like under like full on national lockdown for a while. And, that's really the origins of this podcast go back to us being locked up in our houses really and not being able to do anything and having, everything canceled. And so we just figured, we had to do something. So that's how we came up with the idea of doing a podcast for exactly the same reason, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that, I mean, it's not great that everybody was locked down, but, I think it gave people that, even though it was a shock, it gave people that situation where, well, I can't do much else. If there's a thing I wanted to pursue, whether it be, something professionally or a hobby, now I have a time. So let me just do it. So hopefully people made good use of the time.
Yeah.
I tried, but of course, I also watched a lot of YouTube.
yeah. It's not easy though, is it, to say, right, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to be creative doing this. It takes, even if you are at home and you've got the time, it's so easy to slip into that trap of, like you say, just sitting on YouTube, sitting on Netflix or Disney
Plus, man.
Disney Plus. There you go. That's the one.
That's super big.
Yeah. It's so easy to fall into that trap, and it still takes a bit of discipline to go,
sure.
you know what? I'm going to get up. I'm going to learn this today. And come 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, whatever, I'm going to be done learning that thing. It takes discipline. It really, really does. And I don't know about you, but I can easily just sit back and, suddenly it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midday, 1 p.m. And I can, on occasion, still not have moved.
Well, I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult when you have kids, I guess, because when lockdown hit here, of course, we were all locked down. I have 3 kids, and we're all stuck in the house. And the thing is, at first, of course, you do things like you try and kind of organize your family life somehow, because you got to and then you come up with ways of keeping everybody entertained, I don't know, like board games or whatever, But it very quickly gets to the point where, you realize you have to do something for your own sanity. Because there's family life on one hand, but it's also you got to keep yourself sane somehow, and you got to do something creative. And for us, it was the idea of coming up with a podcast and just doing, challenging. I mean, we challenge each other. We did photo challenges, and then video challenges. So just some kind of creative challenge, almost every week in the beginning, where we just went right, okay, let's come up with some kind of topic, and then we create a photo each, and then we talk about it, and we talk about the process and whatnot.
That's really good,
something like that. And the video challenge we did. So then, eventually it went to okay, well, that's how we started on the podcast when it was only us. And then when we started having guests on the show, it was okay, how about we involve the guests in the challenge? And, we would come up with little challenges, and we might talk to you about later about some kind of challenge,
Well, it's interesting they say it too, because so I'm a people photographer. I photograph people primarily. I can obviously photograph product, and I have, but it's not the same thing. Sometimes people are well, you have all this time, just take pictures. But it's I take pictures of people, and I couldn't interact with people. So it really was a bit of I have to go sideways for me. So that's why I went the other route. I fell heavily into the YouTube and just talking and communicating, because I felt that was better for me than photographing a still life, let's say, which, but if you're learning, I mean, like I said, it's a good opportunity, but sure, it definitely takes discipline to do anything. And there's a lot of things I started to learn, like OBS, that I never got all the way through. I think it's good enough.
Yeah. OBS, the most unintuitive program I think I've ever come across.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, I think I read in the latest update that now you can do Command Z to undo, because you couldn't undo in OBS before. It's crazy, right? It's you move something.
OBS is a pain. It looks like something that came off of whatever came before Windows 95. That's kind of what the interface looks like, at least on Mac these days. And it's okay, great. So how do we make this slightly easier? It just needs another interface, and it'd be great. OBS is great. Otherwise, it's stable. It does what it does. It's very, very good. So
the price is right.
Price is definitely right. Yeah. So what's that? So over lockdown, over the last sort of 18 months, what have you done photography wise? Obviously you fell very much into the video YouTube world, but what did you end up being able to do from a photography standpoint?
That's a good question. I honestly, I didn't do much. I did. I kind of put my cameras away, which I do sometimes. I think that's actually healthy. I used to not do that when I was, younger, every day I would shoot things. And I think that's part of it, right? That's the drive when you're trying to break into something or whatever. But it was good for me to just not shoot. The cameras became video cameras. I bought a GoPro and tried to mess around with some rivers here where I tried to mess around with some underwater stuff. It didn't work out so well, but it was cool to mess around with it. Nothing that that I tried not to do anything that I cared to show anybody. I was just kind of experimenting and pushing what I could do.
It's important to take time to do that, to experiment with different things. It doesn't mean it has to go. It doesn't always have to be a finished product or, something that goes out to the public.
And I think people fall into that trap, including me, when you do this for a living. Like everything you do needs to be for something, right? It's like, well, I'm going to do. Like the other day, I was having this conversation. I said, every time I go to shoot with somebody, I'm making a video about it because that's what I do. But sometimes it's nice just to do a photo shoot, and so I'm trying to do more of that now that I'm, And it took me this break from it to realize that sometimes I like to just go out and shoot something and not worry about if there's a video. Of course, inevitably, I put the picture up somewhere and everybody's like, where's the video? There's no video on that one. Sorry. But you know what? You got to do it for yourself sometimes. So,
yeah. How do you find shooting videos and still taking that portrait, for example, at the same time? Do you have an assistant when you typically do those shoots?
Assistant, yeah. An assistant or a system?
Both. Both. Yeah.
Well, during COVID, no, right? That was then when I first went back to it. I was okay. I asked people that I knew pretty well, that I trusted. They got tested right before. I wore a mask. I was there by myself, except for them. We stayed distance. They had to take it off, obviously, for the photo. So that was a lot trickier. But I have a pretty cool system of shooting where I don't need somebody to help me, but it's really nice to have somebody. I have a multicam system called Sling Studio, and it actually allows for HDMI. There's HDMI transmitters that go into a single unit, and not only does it allow you to switch like OBS, for instance, but it records all the channels. So I'll put cameras where they need to be, and then I will just leave it on the main camera while I'm shooting, and then when I come back to edit, I have all the other footage. I just cut it later. So it's like shooting with a bunch of cameras separately, but it mixes them all together so that when I go to edit it, it's much easier, it's faster. So I can do it myself, but it is nice. I usually have Dave help me when possible. He is not only an amazing filmmaker, he's also great as a photo assistant. So, when he's not filming me, he's helping me set things up, or, I'm bouncing ideas. I'm like, I want to do this video on this kind of light or whatever, because the thing is that no matter what people want to produce, well, I can't speak for everybody. Yes, I will. I will speak for everybody. You look at somebody who's teaching something as if they know everything, but the reality is that we're still always learning. No matter what, you can understand light and you can understand how things work, and I can tell you the science of it, but you still kind of are playing around with ideas. So having somebody else there to kind of be like, hey, why don't you try this? Or what about this is so great. I think getting feedback from people is really important. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people are very defensive, especially when they're first kind of breaking into that professional level. They've been learning, whatever, and then they get to that first level where they're getting paid or they're kind of getting respect, and then they don't want to hear anything from anybody. It's like, no, I know this. But the reality is that there's a lot of times that somebody will say something to me and I'll just be like, oh, yeah, you're right. That's exactly how we should do it. And it's better than what I was thinking. And you have to be able to put that aside. The shoot is the most important thing, not your ego. So I love having somebody there that I can kind of bounce ideas off. And so, I would much rather have an assistant. And I basically have somebody who does both, an assistant and he shoots. So Dave's great. Yay, Dave.
Yay to Dave, definitely. It's funny, we were on a podcast ourselves a little earlier today, and we just got done saying almost exactly the same thing, because we do a lot of work together, just outside of the podcast. And it makes all the difference to have someone to bounce ideas off. Yes. And, because I primarily do video, we'll go into a video shoot and Kat go, oh, what about that? Oh, what about this angle? Or this lighting, or whatever it might be, or this direction to these guys. And so, oh God, yeah, absolutely. That's great, because it's all about getting the right thing. And same when we get into the photo world.
Yeah, I think
it really helps.
I mean, one of the things for us, when we first started working together, was that my background really professionally, if you want, is stills photography, and Nick's background is videography. And so I think when we first started working together, Nick was very much concerned with camera movements and angles and stuff like that. And my focus has always been on lighting, so the important thing for me has always been like how something's lit, how soft or how hard the light is, and, all that kind of stuff. And when we first started working together, there was almost like our sort of predetermined roles was like, Nick was like thinking about how the camera moved, and I was thinking about how something was being lit. And I think as we've worked together over the last 2 years or something, or 3 years maybe, we've both learned from each other. So we're now starting to think more like one, almost so it's like,
there's a sci-fi film in that, isn't there?
Well, and I think it's really interesting too, the idea of somebody who is primarily a filmmaker and somebody who is primarily a still photographer working together. As Dave is a filmmaker primarily. So, and Sal, who originally shot all the on-set stuff when we first started doing it, and Fernando, who does the puppets, like all these guys, I learned so much from them because I had always shot stills. I've been on film sets, but seeing how a filmmaker thinks about light, movement, angles, the idea of storytelling through wide, narrow, close, like that kind of stuff. It's such an interesting thing when you're working to see the difference, and how they can work together and create kind of an overall a project, right? So
what's also interesting, I think, for both of us, is like my wife's she's her background is in script writing, and so what's really interesting, like with her, is that we'd be watching the same movie, and I'd be really fixated on the lighting or the camera moves and all that kind of stuff, and I was like, oh, the color grading, this is great, and then she'd be like, yeah, but the story is really shit, or the dialogue's terrible, or or the acting is really wooden.
But look at the teal in the shadows. It's fantastic.
Exactly.
Yes.
But it's really interesting to have these different angles and to look at something, at the same scene. You can look at the same scene with these different eyes and discover something different every time. And that's been really good. I mean, we've done. I mean, Nick and me work on a lot of stills projects together, like photography projects and video projects. And so, we, depending on what it is, one of us would take the lead and the other one would, in the broadest terms, become the assistant. But really, it's a matter of, feedbacking on each other's experience, with the single goal of making it the best, of creating the best possible outcome. And that's been really quite useful, actually.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I think that a lot of people, and this is not new because it's from when I started to, they're like, you even hesitated to say assistant, like almost going to be an insult, but the reality is that's the best way to do it. When I was first starting, we would be assistants for big photographers, and then when we did our own shoots, we'd hire each other to help, because having somebody at your level helping you or assisting you it's not like maybe they are sweeping the floors, but it's, who cares, right? There's nothing wrong with sweeping the floor. And having somebody there to help you is not a bad thing. And it certainly isn't, when people are like, oh, well, they're your assistant. It's like, yeah. And that's a huge thing. And assistant is such an important part of the role to have on the set. They're super important, because people, especially people who only see it from the filmmaking side, don't realize that like a photo assistant does everything, right? Like if you're on a film set, like you've got gaffers, and then you have to get the gaffer, then you got your electrics, then you got your grips, and all those people. A photo assistant does all of that, So they're more than just somebody carrying your stuff. They're actually a skilled participant in the shoot. They're part of it. And what you said is super important, because the day I stopped assisting, and I said, I might have said this before in a video, but I don't know, but is the day I realized that I didn't care anymore about the stuff I was working on. Like, I met many photo assistants that just did it for the money. And for me, a good assistant cares about that shoot as much as if it was their own shoot. Like, if you're an assistant, it should be just as important to you as the photographer. Like, it's your shoot too. And if you're just there carrying the gear and you don't really care about it, you shouldn't be an assistant. Like, that's not that job.
Yeah, I liken it to, just because the football soccer. European Championships are on over here right now, right? And
isn't that all year?
Yeah.
Well, and actually, I still haven't worked out where they actually take place.
All over Europe this year. Let's not get into that. It's mental. It makes no sense what they've done. They're trying to be all European inclusive with this. I'm not getting into it. It's no point. It's crazy. From a footballing perspective, it's crazy. Because they're all exhausted. They're all flying around all the time.
But isn't it also crazy from like a COVID perspective? This doesn't
that
make any sense.
aside. What I was going to say is that for football, what they have done for years now is you've got your referee and you've got what used to be called linesmen, right? Who go up and down.
What are they called now?
Well, the point of them really is to be a second pair of eyes to look for offsides and fouls and things like that. And then they have a fourth official who does all the like stoppage time and that kind of stuff. And there's more now, but it doesn't really matter. Anyway, they're not called that anymore because they're all called assistant referees, not called linesmen. And the reason they're called assistant referees is because actually they're all made up of actual referees. They're all referees. They're all the same. They all interchange and they all swap around and they all do all that, not during a match, but over the course of a season and whatnot. They're all just as qualified to do all of those roles, but they're just there to assist in that particular match. They're just as important. If they weren't there, the match would be a nightmare. It would not work. Anyway.
See, football analogies mean nothing to me because I know nothing about football whatsoever.
Yeah, I just nod my head when people talk about it. Oh, yeah, okay.
You just see Daniel going soccer. I have no idea.
Soccer? What is soccer?
Kick the ball around.
Yeah.
I have two good friends that are constantly talking about it, and they're always, and I'm just like, oh, okay, good, yeah. And they're like, oh, it's the finals or whatever. It's like the finals again. Like, didn't you just have those? But what? I guess it's huge, right? It's worldwide, so there are all these things going on.
Are you shooting Nikon at the moment?
Yeah, I have Nikon now. Well, it's funny when I was because I was on staff at Adorama for a long time. In the last 3 years, I've now been freelancer. They were like, I had to be brand agnostic. I used to say because you can't really, they're a camera store, right? So you can't favor one over another. So I actually had in my arsenal like everything. I had a Nikon, I had a Canon, I had a Sony, I didn't have everything. I didn't have an Olympus. I had a medium format camera, Mamiya. And I had the Pentax medium format, I think, too, at one point, and was it a Fuji. So I had all these cameras. Of course, then when I had to buy my own cameras, not so much. So I was using Canon for a long time, but when they came up with the Z6, I thought I would try it as like a small camera to have, and it's been really good. And now I'm using the Z6 II. That's what I use here. And I keep it at my house. I can film myself, and then if I want to take pictures, I have it. So it's good. It's probably overkill for a webcam, but you do.
How are you finding the Z6 II? You enjoying it? Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not really a gear person. I mean, that seems weird maybe, but cameras and camera manufacturers don't like when I say that, but they're all good. I like different cameras for different things. I like the Nikon. It's light. It's fast. It's not that many megapixels, so it's good for me because I don't do projects where I need a lot of megapixels, so I don't want to deal with huge files. Does video nicely, charges off USB, which is nice, or runs off USB.
I've been toying with the idea of sort of upgrading to mirrorless at some point, but I'm currently I'm shooting a D750, and I've been shooting that thing for years, and it's been good. It's been indestructible. It's been great on every project I've shot. There's no actual real reason to upgrade other than the fact that we may be coming to the end of the shutter life, if you know what I mean. So, potentially, but other than that, it's working fine. And, so I'm like, it's because I'm German, I'm stingy. I'm Southern German. We're supposed to be stingy.
Well, it's funny you say that because of course, now in the last couple of years, I bought 2 cameras, but up to that point, I hadn't really actually owned too many cameras except for when I needed to, because I thought the same thing. It's like all these new cameras would come out, and I'd be like, well, I don't need that, or if it's a feature I need once in a while, I would just rent it. So for me, I have not owned that many digital cameras, even though I got my first one in 99, 2000, something like that. And Yeah, I haven't. I mean, I've maybe owned 5 cameras the whole time. So, I don't see the point in upgrading all the time, to be honest.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Totally agree.
There's really no need. I mean, although having said that, it's been like Nick's recently upgraded from Panasonic to Canon. And it has actually made our lives considerably easier on some of the projects that we've been shooting. So from it's not that it would have been impossible to shoot those things.
No, it's kind of future proofing to a certain extent, and I didn't have 120 with it. There's a handful of little things that was just started to get on my nerves that I wanted to be able to do on the majority of shoots, to have the ability to, and I wasn't able to, and that it started to become a roadblock for me. Started to become a bit of an issue. Then that was the point where I went, okay, maybe it's time to start considering a shift, an upgrade of some kind. And then I thought, okay, well, because I was shooting Nikon stills at that point as well. I thought, okay, well, can I just shift into one world and share lenses across all of that and doing that? Right. So I ended up with, and don't get me wrong, this was a super expensive change, but it's going to see me through for the longest time. So I ended up with the R6 primarily for stills, but with fantastic video capability, and it really is good. And a C70 for video primarily.
Yeah, I think that right. That's the time that you upgrade, right? There is a time. I'm not saying you should ever buy a new camera, obviously, but if you need something, like when this came out, like I had the Z6 one and I really liked it, and then this came out and it has the USB power, and I wanted that one feature, but I wasn't going to buy a new camera for that. But it just turned out I needed another camera because IG bought the cam. So I was like, well, because what I was doing to that point was I was actually using a Sony and a Nikon, and then I'd have to color grade them together, so it was a pain in the butt. So I'm like, you know what, I'll invest in 2 Nikons so that I can be easy. So that's why. So now the Sony sits in the bag collecting dust until I need it.
Bye-bye, Sony. Bye-bye. All your green colors, go away. I'm joking.
So I've really enjoyed the videos that you started doing throughout the whole lockdown period, because you did a whole bunch of porch videos, I call them, where you were just talking. I think you were sitting on your porch probably just talking about certain subjects. They were really, I thought they were really interesting because they were a little bit removed from the technical side of things.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot more to photography than the technical. And I think when you're trying to learn something, the first thing you do is you go for that thing. Like, how do I do this? Where do I put the light? What's the aperture? How do these things work together? But the real meat of it is the rest, especially in the photography of people, because there's so much, I always say if you photograph people, you need to be a people person. Because you need to interact with people. Because if you photograph them like they're mannequins, it won't be, at least in my opinion, the same. So I felt like it was an opportunity for me to talk more about that stuff where, Adorama being, obviously it's a store, right? And people go there for more like I don't want to say formal, but kind of a strict kind of regular photo education. I didn't think videos like that fit there so much, although they have asked me to do some. So maybe I'll do something like that on Adorama eventually. But I thought that was just a way I could communicate, some of the other stuff that I think is important. As a photographer and just as a person, really, I think that you are, right? Photography is like an art in a sense. So in a sense, it's not really, you need to express yourself, and that's part of it, right? That's why we do it. A lot of us, I know people who do it just for the money, but I think a lot of people, especially people that are watching videos on wanting to grow in photography, are doing it because they love it and they have a passion for it. They do it even if it wasn't for a job. So there's that part of it. And I want to talk more about that.
Yeah, I thought there were some really interesting topics that you covered that you don't really see that many people cover. Like, for instance, remember, things like, how to book models and whether to pay them or not, or, all that kind of stuff. Because those are actually real life questions that you ask yourself, especially when you're first starting out and you've no experience with working with models, for example. And you kind of go, well, I see all these people on YouTube, shooting all these models, and I don't know any models, and how do I do that? Do I pay them? Is it expensive?
They're not the easiest questions to go and find answers to.
No, exactly. That's what I mean. That was or you did a video on the basic things you need in order to set yourself up as a professional photographer or something like that. And those are like really actually what we call meat and potato type of questions, and you don't really get get to listen to the answers to that. So I thought that was really good. So you planning on doing that, continuing that sort of type of video?
Yeah, I am. I lately, done the last few months, I've been doing videos. I moved to 12. At first, I was going to do 2 videos a week, but I've just been really busy with other things. So on Friday, I started doing, and those have been pretty well received. So every Friday, I kind of just talk about a topic briefly. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to collect interest, right? So let's say I talk about something, I think last week I talked about outsourcing your retouching. If I get a lot of comments and people are asking me more about it, I'll do a more in-depth kind of porch talk on that, because sometimes I don't know what people want to know. I'm doing the videos for people to learn and for what they want to see, I guess, right? So I'm trying to figure out what it is, because you don't always know that, right? You don't always know what your audience wants, because you can be like, oh, this is great, and then nobody watches the video, or you can be like, oh, I'm just going to talk about this random thing today, and then it's the best video you did in 6 months. It's like, how did that happen? So I'm hoping to use this as a gauge. So I have that going on Fridays. So Fridays, every Friday I do a quick talk, and then I was doing a series of videos where I'm teaching photography to Marissa Roper, who is a common subject that I have a lot. She's an actress, and she wanted to learn photography and asked me to teach her. And I said, well, sure, if we can make videos about it, because that's the life, right? So we've been doing that, but then we had technical difficulties in the last one, and she's been working a lot, so we haven't had a chance to put those out. But that's going to continue as well. People like that. It's kind of fun. One thing I really want to capture in my stuff is to really have it be more slice of life. I don't like to heavily edit things, and which, no offense to the filmmakers, but slow motion and the camera's moving around and me looking like a badass. The reality is that I'm not a badass. So no matter how much I walk in slow motion, it's not going to happen. So, I really just want to it look like, because I think people are intimidated sometimes when they see that. It's like the music's like boom, 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 and the photographer's like coming in, and then the makeup artist is doing this stuff, and then fully retouched pictures pop up on the screen, and people are like, But the reality is, a photo shoot is not really like that. It's either you're killing yourself because it's like a production. It's like, got to get more shots done, or it's like a chill. You're hanging out with somebody, making a portrait, having a conversation. So I really am trying to capture that vibe as much as possible in my stuff that I put out there. Kind of a different angle, I guess.
I love the idea of the series with it's Marissa, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's such a great idea, particularly for someone watching it from the outside who's perhaps relatively new to photography, that they get to see someone else being taught and grow at the same time and go, I'm not learning slowly. I'm not actually that bad after all. That gives a real degree of confidence to someone learning and watching that and seeing the mistakes and seeing that these results aren't perfect straight away. If they are, something's probably wrong, or you got really lucky. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's a really good thing to see that side of things.
Well, and it's funny too, because when we decided to do it the first time, she was like, well, let's just go over everything first so I don't look stupid. She didn't want to look, nobody wants to look stupid. I'm like, no.
Sure.
You're supposed to be learning. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you. And in fact, when she asks questions where she's like, oh, I don't want to ask this question, I'm like, just ask. I get so many comments like, oh, that's the question I would have asked. So we wanted to make it, like I said, not scripted, not, I try not to make her look, No, I just film it. I mean, she's awesome, so that's who she is. She's just a fun person who has lots of questions and wants to learn. And I think a lot of people are that, right? A lot of people want to learn, and they would love to just be able to ask somebody. So she's their voice, and I like that. Yeah.
Oh, couldn't agree more. I love it. Absolutely love it, man. So good.
But we should have some more of that coming. Yeah. Yeah. I had an audio screw up where it didn't record. So we have a whole silent video. But I had luckily recorded it on my Zoom recorder. So I found the audio file, thankfully. So now I just have to, but of course I have no audio on the video, and I have the audio file. So that's going to be fun lining it up.
Oh yeah.
Watching people's lips move, I'll be like, but I'll make it work eventually. But yeah.
Oh, and you see, you should put that in the video itself and explain what happened, because these are the little mistakes that we all make. Everybody, mate. Every full-on pro makes it happens in Hollywood, I'm sure, all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, this stuff happens. And when you're learning, you don't get to see that often. And you start to believe that these people are just doing it right and perfect every single time. No.
I mean, this is the thing. This is the thing always, I think, in creative arts, in photography or, or in film or whatever, is that people always only see the end product. They see the final portrait or the final headshot, if it's a headshot or whatever. What they don't see is the 600 other photos that you've taken that were total trash. Or maybe not even total trash, but the 600 other photos that just simply didn't make it. Because you narrowed it down to that one hero shot,
Right, which is exactly why I do the videos the way I do them. I like when I'm doing a technical video, like I'm tethered to capture one, and you're seeing exactly what's coming out of the camera. Sometimes, I'll take a shot, and be like, oh, I forgot to turn this on, and because that's how it is. Like that's how it is when you're shooting, and you don't have to feel like one thing I say a lot when I'm especially in live demos when it happens, if you're using like TTL, because people are always afraid of that, and you take a shot and it's like complete garbage, you just take another one. I mean, it's like it happens, don't make a big deal out of it. Just keep going,
Yeah.
If the only thing that's going to make your client uncomfortable is if you look like you're like, oh my God, it's like, just take another one, it's not a big deal.
It's always the best when you take a headshot and you go, oh no. That's the worst thing. It's like, oh God.
Is that your face?
It's like, right. It's like, what happened here? Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's like, you just got to smile. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I meant to do that, That's usually what I say. So
we like some comedy outtakes. That's what we want.
yeah, exactly.
Ooh, that's one for Facebook.
Yeah. But I think that helps people too, because if they see, a lot of times people are tense, like in a portrait setting. And one thing that I get too, another question or comment I get a lot, which is, and I try to answer it, so I'll say it here. That way all the world can hear it. So I don't keep saying is that people are always like, why do you use actors or whatever for these things? Like, why don't you use real people? But you have to understand that like being photographed in a video, or especially on a live stream, is incredibly tense. Yeah. And somebody who's uncomfortable in front of the camera anyways is definitely not going to ever get comfortable if they're being videoed as well. Yeah. So like you've got to use people that are, at least comfortable being in front of people. That's the only way we can do it. And even those people, like I just mentioned, like Marissa, like of all the time, she's done tons of stuff. She's a great actor. She's just fantastic. She's like, oh, I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm talking about. Even somebody who is very confident and very skilled will feel that way. So she is a real person. It's like everybody's a real person. So for those people that want the real person, I mean, everybody's real, I guess, right?
Definitely. So, it is harder to be in front of the camera than it is behind.
But this is the thing. Like in realistic terms, I get this sometimes when I have somebody book in for headshots, for example, and I'll go like, well, how long is it going to take? And I'll be like, well, you want to put like a couple of hours aside because that's how I like to work. And they're like, 2 hours? But it's like, all I need is a headshot. It's like, but it's going to take us a while until you feel comfortable in front of the camera. And that's when we get to the good stuff. If you're after a passport photo, I know somebody considerably cheaper down the road. If that's what you want, that's cool. But, that's just one thing that I've realized, over the years is that, people who, the vast, vast, vast majority of people are just not comfortable having a massive lens stuck in their face and being photographed with like artificial lighting and, strobes going off and everything else. It's just such an unnatural environment to be in that in order for you to feel even remotely comfortable with that, it just takes some time and you need to build up some trust between you and the subject. And that just takes time. And that's the only factor in the sense that we can control ultimately is the time factor. We can just give it some time. And that then as an end result will result in a better end result. In the end,
right?
Everything.
And the more you work with somebody, the less time it takes. That's what happens there, right? Like if you have a regular client base that comes for their new headshot every year, they might be able to do it in 20 minutes. The third time because they know you're friendly. Yeah. You get it right away, and then you hang out and have coffee. It's like a different experience.
Exactly.
But sure, it's funny when you said that about the 2 hours, because that's exactly everybody gets that, right? It's like, how long does it take for a headshot? Like they're thinking you're going to say 10 minutes, and it's like, 2 hours, whatever. And they're just like, oh.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like, because they're thinking that whole 2 hours, they're like It's like, no, you're not going to be sitting on there the whole 2 hours. We're going to talk. We're going to look at your clothes. We're going to figure this out. We're going to look at the pictures. We're going to kind of figure things out. That I usually, I love to sit down with people and look at them in between when I'm doing headshots, especially if they're not experienced, because they need to make sure that they can see what they're getting, So I always have them look at it, and also just in case they hate them.
Yeah.
You could be like, well, what is it that you don't like about this? Because maybe it's they're used to their cell phone picture and they don't know, what it should look like, and then
I mean, I do this pretty much in every headshot session. Is that the first thing we're doing is like we sit down, we have a chat, and that basically gives me a chance to just work them out, figure out work out what their face is like and all the rest of it. But also it's just an opportunity to kind of start to get comfortable with each other a little bit and build up a little bit of a rapport. But then, when we start shooting, we maybe shoot for about 10 minutes, and then I get them to come over to the screen and we'll just have a look at the shots. And I know they're all burners. All these shots they're not going to be, this is most likely not going to be any keepers in that. But whilst they're looking at the photos and, I go through them, I watch their expression and I watch what their kind of feedback is. And I work out simple things like which side they prefer. This is a big one. People very often have like one side of their face that they like and one that doesn't. You can learn a lot from listening really intently to what the client's comments are. And then you can basically then direct the shoot after that. Because ultimately, especially when it comes to a headshot, one that they might be using for their company website or for LinkedIn or whatever it is, you really want to make sure you know exactly what they like about themselves and what they don't like. That's really important because it's not about what I think. I'm just advising them. They need to like themselves in the photo in the end. And so, the amount of times I think that, a typical situation where they go, you just pick the final photo, you're the expert. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Because I can guarantee you the shots that I pick are the ones that you're not going to like.
Right, right. Well, it's funny you say that because, I'm just thinking about how I do it. And one thing that I've seen people do is, they bring them to the computer and then they sit there and go through them going, oh, this is a good one. This is a good one to the client. But that's exactly not the way to do it. What you're explaining is much better. And what I often do is I just show them how to do it. Like I say, this is how you move them around. And then I'll even take 2 steps back. And I let them kind of be alone with the photos. I mean, I'm there, obviously, watching them, just like you said, seeing their reactions, seeing what they say. But I don't control that part of it. I want them to see the pictures, because I feel like if I'm doing it, they won't challenge, let's say, what I say, because I'm the expert, right? So I want them to look at it and be like, oh, this one or that one, So yeah, that's a good point. And I think that those are subtle things that you just learn over time that aren't like something you can easily just know until you try it, I guess. And that, again, that comes down to being interacting with your subject and being good with people in a sense, right? Is you understand that you need to see somebody their space versus get on top of them with the. So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I basically let them give them a star rating. Like, with the first time through, they'll have on Lightroom, they'll just have 1 star type of rating.
Oh, interesting.
I'll just filter out the ones that they don't like, basically. And, so, yeah, I let them do that. And
then a bit of, you like that one, right? You like that one.
Well, I mean, there are occasions. Okay, so there are occasions.
Of course.
There are occasions, of course, where I look at a shot and I'm like, I know this is a hero shot. Like, this is an awesome shot, this particular one, but they may not like it for whatever reason. And so what I say is, okay, listen, we're going to add this one. I'm going to retouch this one for free because I know I want this one for my portfolio. And I give it to you for free. I don't care. But we're not going to throw this one away. Right? Yeah. Just, on this one, just trust me. And then, usually 99 times out of 100, once I'm done with the retouch and they actually see it, they tend to agree, and that's all cool. They still have all the other shots that they like. Well, in this one, just trust me on this one,
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I think an important thing to do is, so the way I do it is kind of similar. What I do is I mark everything 3 stars and then I have them hit 2 so they disappear because I just capture 1. Yeah. And then after I look at the 2 stars, and then I'll ask them, I'll say, what didn't you like about this if I like it? You know, like I'll see one, I'll be like, oh, that's a really good one. Why is it here? And I'll just say, why don't you like this one? It'll be, you know, it could be anything. It could be like, oh, well, you know, my shirt's wrinkled, you know, whatever. It could be something that you could easily retouch out, or it could be something as simple as, you know, they don't like the side of their face, right, or whatever. You can start to figure that out. So yeah, that's important, right? You want to know why they don't like the ones they don't like, and also, as much as you want to know what they like, you want to know why they don't like what they don't like, because it might not be what you think. Like I might look at it and go, oh, they don't like that because of the side of their face, but they might say, oh no, I don't like that because something else. But my hair is weird. Or something that, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So and then, of course, it's super interesting. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, and then, you know, or it might be something with the clothing, and like you said, you know, you might know, well, this is easy to read, you know,
exactly.
like, oh, I've got flyaway hairstyles, so I don't like channels, so they're not going to be in there.
Yeah,
you know, right, exactly, because they're not seeing that there are certain things that you know that you could fix, or like maybe they have a blemish on that side of their face, and that's something you could fix, and you know they're overly aware of it. I mean, I usually obviously tell them, man, it's like, don't worry about that.
Yeah,
don't worry.
Exactly.
I'll even like quickly make it disappear, you know, be like, look, boom, it goes, you know, goes away with a healing brush, whatever. It's like, there you go. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's important though. Getting somebody to feel comfortable and knowing why they like a shot is like the key to portrait photography to me. Yeah. Although there's that level beyond, that's like the portrait when somebody's hiring you, where I don't know where I read this, but maybe it's a myth, right? Everything's a myth now. We find out when we read online, but that Richard Avedon used to feel like he was really successful when somebody left his studio and they didn't like the photo, because almost always they would love it like a week later, because it was really showing something true about them that they kind of didn't want to put out there, you know, like, because they were a lot of celebrities, right? So he would shoot these people and they'd be like, oh, you know, but they wouldn't tell him, of course, because, you know, nobody's going to tell Richard Avedon, no, it's no good, right? And then later they come back and he would have people come to him and be like, I really love that shot, but I didn't like it when you shot it, because it revealed something about me that I didn't really see in myself. And I think that's like next level portrait stuff, you know, that you're striving for. And you can get that if you, I mean, he would get it with people he just met, obviously, because he's Avedon, but like, you know, when you photograph somebody a lot, like you can get them to break out of their shell and do something they normally wouldn't like about the, you know, in a portrait. And then it actually becomes almost like it frees them up, so the portraiture can do that. And I think it's really an interesting, like, next level step, but certainly not in a corporate headshot. You know, wow. You want them to like those pictures. So yeah, I think it's important to know like why somebody doesn't like something and to capture that. Like to photograph somebody who, let's say, is obsessive about their beauty, but to show the flaws, you know, I think is a really interesting thing, and have them embrace that in a portrait can be a really, really powerful. It's just that getting them to do it is part of the psychology, or the part of being a people photographer, right? Where you get somebody to feel comfortable enough to reveal that for you, to share that with you, I guess is maybe the best way to say it. Yeah.
Do you guys think that that's something that could take several sessions with someone to really get to that level? Or do you think there's a way to get that in a couple of 3 hours? Do you think that's possible?
I mean, I know, sorry. Sorry, my stepson is trying to call me. And I know exactly what that's about. Can you pick me up from the station because it's raining? The answer is no. I'm kind of busy. When you get to the point where you've shot with somebody several times, I think the more often you shoot with somebody and the more you get to know somebody, the more you let, you know, these inhibitions fall away in a way.
Yeah.
And the more you get to the actual core of it. But that's not too dissimilar from how things work in real life, if you think about it. You know, when you meet somebody, you're not like at the first meeting. I mean, it's a bit like going on dates, right? I mean, it's like the first date. You're not going to go all in on the first date, right? You're going to get to know somebody. You know, you have like casual conversation, blah blah. It's maybe on the third date that you pick up the courage to take it a little bit further. And that's exactly the same thing.
Good God, man, it was like the 6th date for us. That's terrible. Bad.
Hang on. This is episode 61. This is the 61st date for us.
61st date, you're setting it out now.
Jesus.
Damn it.
Yeah.
We're on the clock already. That's
you know, I do think, though, that the longer you photograph somebody, the more depth you can get in the portrait, but I do think it can happen when you just first meet somebody, because maybe you're grabbing something that you don't know that they're holding back, but you see it. And somehow in that moment, you create that connection, which is interesting. You know, I used to, do you have Craigslist?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay. So I used to go on Craigslist, which is like total creep place now, but it used to not be. I don't know if it's creepy there, but it's like, total creep. And I would like sometimes just be like, it'd be like a Friday morning and I'd be like, I just want to photograph somebody. And I would just put a post. I'd be like, commercial photographer with studio in Manhattan. I'm looking to photograph somebody, not a model, not an actor. You just have always wanted to be photographed. And I'd put that up there, every once in a while. And usually nobody, but every once in a while somebody would answer. And I've gotten some really great portraits that way from somebody that just in that day looked at this thing in the morning and said, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to go to the studio and be photographed. And it's really interesting. And I think I've gotten some really great portraits that way. And I didn't know the people. And like, we only shot once usually. And it was really cool. But those are special times. Like, that doesn't happen that often. And kids, stay off Craigslist.
I mean, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, actually, because I just recently, a few days ago, I did something not too dissimilar to that. Only I used Facebook instead of Craigslist. And so the idea was, I started a photo project back in 2019, late 2019, which I call 3 heads in a row. It's basically 3 images. It's because Instagram is, you've got 3 rows essentially. And so it's like a triptych, 3 images of a person interacting with an object. And these 3 images fit together somehow. And so they build one row on Instagram. And so I call it 3 heads in a row. Check it out. Anyway, so the idea was basically, I'm sitting opposite somebody, maybe like 1.5 yards, maybe something.
Yeah.
Whatever that is in inches. Okay, let's be European. About 1.5 meters.
A meter and a half. Oh, okay.
Daniel's like, what's a meter?
Sorry, yards has really just thrown me there. I've never heard you use yards.
I use yards all the time. I'm not sure about inches. That's all.
Well, that'd be a lot. Well, a meter is 39 inches, right? So,
this is the beauty about
3 feet.
Well, it's feet.
Yeah,
foot. Oh, wow. God,
3
another
feet.
one. Feet. Okay, yeah, about 3 feet. So I'm sitting opposite somebody. And of course, during COVID, that wasn't really the done thing, right? So I had to stop shooting this throughout COVID. And now that things are going back to, now that things are easing up over here in the UK, I'm hell bent on continuing that project. And it's just a personal project. It's fun. And I needed to get, warm blood in front of the lens, essentially. And so I just put a post on Facebook to say, if anybody wants to take part in it, hit me up and, we'll arrange something and we can get going with that. And I had lots of people. Lots of people wanting to get involved, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And there it's not about shooting models or anything like that. It's about shooting characters, shooting like interesting people. And the thing there is, the idea is that they pick 3 objects that mean something to them, right? So there could be personal objects, or there could be things that relate to their job, or it could be anything that they hold dear or that means a lot to them. And then throughout the conversation that we have across the table, I shoot them interacting with this object, right? And so over the whole space of a couple of hours, we get to know each other. We have a really good conversation, and they lose their inhibitions. And so the images, I can push them further and further until we get to the point where these images start to look hilarious and funny and way over the top sometimes, but they just come out of their shell a little bit. And that's the end result is these 3 images that we get out of the session. And for me, it's really interesting because of the stories attached to these objects, because I get them to talk about why they chose this object, what it means to them, and blah, blah, blah. And it's been really interesting to get to hear people's stories, and of course, they get some really funny pictures out of it. I mean, that's the other thing. But yeah, so not too dissimilar from hitting up Craigslist.
Yeah.
I'll put this on Facebook and worked well.
I like that too, and I like the idea that you're digging into like a story, because I think that's where portrait becomes very strong, is when you're actually looking at the person, not just their physicality, but what makes them up as a person, or whatever that might be, and deeper than surface level. Not you're a photographer, so I'm gonna take a picture of you holding a camera, but something more than that, I remember in college, we had to do that. We had to make a self-portrait, and we weren't allowed to because everybody's a photographer. So it's like, you can't take a picture of yourself with a camera. And it was like, well, what do you do? We all identify as photographers, so, and you learned about people, like something you maybe didn't know about people in your class, because now you saw somebody, whatever they were, a long time ago, I don't remember what people did, but like fishing or something, right? And it's like, well, I didn't know that you fished, because people put forward what they want to show, but maybe, interacting with, if you had to pick 3 objects, right, it might be something that you wouldn't have expected me to have, So I really like that. That's a really great idea.
It's finding out what those 2 or 3 things are that someone would perhaps do at home on their own, would go out and do on their own. They're the things that people don't necessarily show.
Well, some of those,
you'd be there with a puzzle, wouldn't you?
Yeah, pretty much. But some of those, I remember like one particular subject, Pete. He was that was really interesting to shoot him, because he was a real guitar hero back in the 80s and 90s. He used to be the lead guitarist for a band called Asia. And
okay, sure.
Yeah, so bona fide guitar hero, and incidentally, one of my teachers at college. But he, in the early 2000s, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and as a consequence, had to stop playing. And he then went into academia and became a professor and for, I think it's the history of science or something like that. He wrote several books, and of course, the problem was that because of his disease, he lost his ability to handwrite or write by hand really early on, and relies on technology and all the rest of it, and of course lots of medication. And so he picked 3 objects. One was a pen, the other one was his laptop, and the third one was his box, his like pill box, with his medication. And of course he picked the pen because this is like a reminder of an ability that he's lost, and yet it makes, like, writing is his main income and livelihood. And so that pen means a lot to him, because it's something that he earns his living with, but he can't actually do. He can't actually write by hand. And the laptop, of course, so signifies the fact that this is the only way he can communicate with the world, in a sense, is through technology and through his laptop. And that's, his whole livelihood is based on this one piece of technology. And then, of course, the box of pills is basically that without his medication, he wouldn't be around anymore. As simple as that. He'd be dead by now if it wasn't for that. And so, you get an insight into somebody's life whilst you're shooting this session, which is really quite remarkable. But then at the same time, of course, these 3 objects really personify who that person is, in a way. So it's an interesting, I don't know, it's just an interesting thing to learn about people and have these conversations.
And not a guitar in sight.
And not a guitar in sight, exactly.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, because you think of the pen, right? Because even if he's not using it, like, that's such a, if you thought of writing, right, even though we probably mostly write like with keyboards these days or on your iPad or something, I think people would think of a pen as something to symbolize that. So it's a really interesting, even though he's not able to use it, it's such a strong connection to that, and the physicality of it. Yeah, that's really interesting. I could see not having the guitar, especially if it's something that he did in the past, because you sometimes there's stages in your life, right? Like, and if you've moved on, it's not that you should forget about what you did, but you can't linger either, right? So I think that's super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a chapter that sometimes you have to close a chapter in order to open a new one. I think that's the thing.
Right. Yeah, and that's hard to do. It's hard to let go of what's there. So it's kind of good that. It seems like he probably has. I mean, I'm psychoanalyzing somebody I've never met. That's pretty good. Like, I wouldn't have. We go to his house, it's all covered with guitars. I didn't want to show this. No, and what's funny about it is the very first thing. So the very first thing that a lot of people might think of is exactly that, right? If you were said, "Oh, I have to photograph this gentleman Pete," and he was a guitar, in Asia, and you would probably be like, "Oh, I want to photograph him with a guitar," and that's probably the furthest thing from what he actually wants, right? Clearly, in this case, so it's really interesting as photographers how we can sometimes slip into that. I remember. this is a while ago now, but I photographed a rapper, Wiz Khalifa, and he's like known for like having covered in tattoos. And he's like, so every shot of him, of course, before you're going to photograph somebody, you see what's out there, right? And every shot of him is him like flexing, covered in tattoos or whatever. And he showed up at the studio and he was like in some kind of cool clothes or whatever. And like there was like a producer there, and he's like, "Oh, we're going to shoot with his shirt off." And I could see that it didn't seem like that's what he wanted to do. Like I could kind of see he was just like, he did like one of those things. Like, and I was like, "You don't want to shoot with your shirt off?" He's like, "No, I always do that." I'm like, "All right, we won't." And I shot him for the magazine without that. I shot him in his clothes that he wanted to wear, because everybody photographs him for the tattoos, and he didn't want that. And sometimes you have to see beyond that and not and do something different, to make the subject more comfortable. And because of that, I think we got a really good shoot, where otherwise he probably would have done the same picture they did for everybody else when they tell him to take his shirt off. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of interesting, right, as photographers, so we can find something different if we listen to our subject, and listen sometimes is watching, right? Mm-hmm. So.
That's hard to do, isn't it? And I don't think many people necessarily do that. And if you for whatever reason don't have or don't yet have the ability to notice those kind of things about people, because that's not easy to do. So it is a skill. Ask. Open your mouth. Speak to them. Ask them. Yeah. Don't hold them at an arm's length somewhere. Just speak to them. Find out what they want. What are they looking for from this? It's so important. Yeah. It's so rarely done.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think a lot of times when we're doing a portrait, especially like more of a commercial portrait, we have ideas, right? Because you don't want to just, especially if you're being hired by a client, you don't want to be like, "Oh, I'll figure it out when I get there." So you want to have like these ideas, like, this is kind of what I'm going to do. This is what I'm thinking. And a lot of times you haven't actually interacted with the subject yet. You're just talking to producers and stuff. So you don't really know what they want, and you already have these ideas. So you have to be ready to throw all that away if the subject doesn't want that, because I think you'll really get something better if that's the case. And it's hard to do sometimes, but yeah, like I say, you got to talk to them. Yeah. And that's why I always try to talk to people first. I learned that from being a photo assistant, going back to that. Like, I worked for this guy, Andrew Kaufman, and he photographed a lot of people. We worked for like Newsweek and Time and stuff, and we would fly all over the place photographing people. And he was just great like that. He would do a little research on them, and then as soon as he met him, he'd be like, "Oh, blah blah, it's such that you did this, you did." He would know something about him, and he could just get them talking about things, and that got people really comfortable and willing to do the things he wanted to suggest, basically. Yeah. Oh, very cool. So good tip, kids.
So that's 2 tips for kids so far.
Yeah. Stay on Craigslist, do your research.
And also, if you talk to them first, you can charge more.
Exactly.
Like it.
Absolutely.
Took an evil route there. I like it. Yeah, not bad. Right? Not bad.
Yeah.
So how did you, when you first got into photography, how did you know from the beginning that portrait photography, or people photography, if you want, was going to be the thing that attracted you to photography, or did it take some time for you to figure that out?
No, I definitely did. I mean, I think I got into photography to interact with people. I was very shy when I was younger. I still am at some level, even though you might not see that, but you can turn it on. And I got a camera, and it just allowed me to say, "Hey, let me take your picture." It was a way I could like approach somebody. So right away, I was photographing people from the very beginning. That was what I did, really. Yeah. Then I wanted to do fashion, which I did for a long time, because I just thought it was kind of cool. And I really was into the idea of fashion, the idea of like the culture of it, like kind of how it works, how it changes, like how important it is, but yet we don't see it a lot of times. It's just there. How kind of like how people dress and how they interact with things, and how that kind of society sees it and stuff. I thought it was really interesting. And I think if you want to get into fashion photography, you should be into that part of it and not into the girls. Like, I think a lot of people want to just photograph beautiful women, and that's why but that's not what it's. I mean, you do obviously photograph beautiful women and men, but it's really about a lifestyle, and you have to kind of be on it. It's part of what you do. So I was very into it. Like, I would watch trends coming, and and that's the cool stuff, right? When you photograph something in a way and people are like, oh, nobody's doing that. And then 6 months later, everybody's doing it. It's like, yes, that's where you want to be. That was a challenge. It was super fun. But then I realized that I liked the people more, and that's how I sort of shifted more into portraits from there. So, yeah, but always people. I mean, I shot a lot of product photography. I was very lucky that I worked for a lot of photographers that did a ton of different things. News photographers, corporate portrait, product, like all the food, all kinds of stuff. And I learned, I didn't want to do it, but I needed the money because I had to work. So it was like, oh, you got to photograph the still life today. All right, I'll take the money and I'll work for you. But you learn so much, working for different types of photographers and how they operate. And so I definitely recommend that, even if you want to do something very strongly, to try other things.
Yeah. You'll take a little bit of every single photographer that you've worked with, a little bit of every style of photography that's being done there, and you'll take it into your own every time.
Yeah.
Every single time. How are you with fashion?
I'm very fashionable. As long as it's denim. As long as it's denim, I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Denim or Star Wars prints?
Yeah.
There you go. That seems right.
Yeah. Right?
As long as it's right for you. Yeah. As long as it's right for you.
You've done some product recently, haven't you?
I'm still doing it.
Oh, yeah, true.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I mean, product photography is not really what I do at all. And so it's been a bit of a learning curve. But, COVID is what it is. And you have to take jobs when they present themselves, I think, is the answer. And so, so I'm shooting shampoo bars.
Egg whites on women, as I understand it.
Oh yeah. Well, so this is fun. This is the part I thought was actually quite fun because I have a thing about special effects. I love special effects, and so I'm shooting these. It's a startup company, and they produce shampoo bars. So rather than liquid shampoos, they're like almost like soap bars, but it's shampoo and conditioner and everything. The idea is because it's not liquid, it's easier to travel with, and they're all natural and all that kind of stuff. So, and it's a startup company, and they asked me whether I could shoot their products, and I said yes, why not? Because I didn't really have that much else to do at the time. And I also thought it'd be an interesting little challenge because we all like a challenge, and I'm not the greatest product photographer in the world, but that was a good opportunity to just get stuck in and figure it out, basically. But some of the shots I wanted were basically like some of the bars also double as kind of body wash type of things, and so they wanted a shot that signifies that, preferably with a model holding the bar against the torso or in some foam and whatever. And so I had a lot of fun figuring out how to create foam that looks like soap foam, but that isn't, and that stays in place.
Right, just blaze, that's the problem, right?
Yeah, that's the problem, exactly. And so I found that, beating egg whites to a very precise point does the trick.
But
I love the whole painting. I love the whole painting the egg whites on the model part. That was awesome. No, I mean, because it's, because it just takes a certain person to let somebody do that to you, and also to endure that for a certain amount of time. It was really fun. Yeah, it was actually fun, and the end result was good.
How long did that take in the end?
The whole thing probably just took about an hour, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. It was only one setup as well. So, no.
How many eggs did you go through?
Maybe 10, I think. Something like that. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I mean, it's basically the problem is that you basically need the consistency to be such that it stays in place and doesn't run off. But you also need a liquid component in the whole thing, because when you have foam, like soap foam, there's also a water component in there in order to make it look realistic. Otherwise, it doesn't look realistic, right? So if you think about it, you have foam, and then you always have some water runoff there as well. And so it was actually more, the experimental part was actually more about getting the consistency right. So that it was just at the right point where you could use it.
So how long did you end up whisking for? And they were just egg whites, you said, right?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, I mean,
it's not yolks.
No yolks.
No yolks.
You definitely don't want to do that.
No, I mean, it took. I mean, to be honest, actually figuring out what the right consistency was, in a sense, that took the longest.
Yeah,
the shoot itself, was more like posing. Actually, it was really just posing the hand.
And that's really interesting, and I think also probably surprising for people that are listening, maybe that don't work on commercial sets, because a lot of times the actual photo shoot is not the longest part. It's all the other stuff, the prepping, the figuring out the consistency in this case, or, makeup if it's a beauty thing, or if it's, some kind of product photography, moving things around, switching things out, the props. All that is actually much more work than the actual photo. The photo is actually kind of the fast part.
We were saying this a few weeks ago. There was I can't remember who it was. There was a cracking beauty portrait that just cropped up with someone we know, and it's all elaborate, lots of makeup and all of that usual kind of jazz. And we actually looked at it, didn't we? We go, that's stunning! What a great photo! And then we looked at it and thought, take all the makeup away, take the headdress away, and things that were there. What are you left with? A couple of decent lights on there, well positioned lights. All right. That's not all that difficult to do, technically. It's all quite straightforward. But when you add in that additional element
the subject
of all of that makeup and what that person ultimately looks like in that shot, it takes on, that's when it starts lifting to that whole new level.
But I mean, we say this all the time. So one of the things I like doing is environmental portraits. So where you have a subject in a particular situation. Because I do like fiddling around with sets and props and building these things and just creating the story around the subject, basically. And this, we say this all the time. I mean, people are always surprised how quick the actual shooting portion is when it takes hours and hours and hours to build the set and put everything together and fiddle around and move one thing like half an inch this way and half an inch the other way and until everything's perfect. But once everything's perfect and you get to the actual shooting part, it's over in 20 minutes.
Yeah. No, it's true. That's it. All the tests to build up. And that's what the tests are for, right? The tests are so that the subject doesn't have to endure that. Correctly. So, I think that's really interesting. It's funny, though, you talk about like removing the stuff, because then my other kind of, besides the revealing portrait that I was talking about earlier, the other thing is this idea that you could take this really simple shot and make it really powerful without the makeup and the all this, if you can draw from your subject something. Because you sometimes see these pictures, and you see a lot of them where somebody's just, it's a simple shot and they're just like looking at the camera and it's really just like, okay. And then you see some where you're just like, wow. And it usually comes down to just like this slight expression in the eyes and how it's pulled, and like to be able to actually pull that out of somebody, or rather put them in the position where they will give that to you, is like something that does take something, right? There is something there beyond the makeup and stuff. So because you've seen, I'm sure you've seen plenty of these like really clean, simple beauty shots that have nothing and they're just amazing, and then somebody replicates the lighting and it's like, well, okay. Because there is that thing, right, where you're like this connection. So it's almost like the more you strip away, the harder it becomes to make this like really special shot. But when you do nail it, it's like, wow, okay, there it is, And I think you can overdo it as well. Like I think people overdo things all the time. Makeup artists do that all the time. So my pet peeve is that makeup artists usually put way too much makeup when it's not needed. It's like they start doing this makeup and they can't stop it, and the person comes out and they're just like, why do they have so much makeup? It's like, it's like, why did you make them look like a clown? They don't normally look like that in life. It's like, so.
Sorry. Makeup artist, can I take your trowel away, please?
It's like, you really need to do that much makeup. They're wearing a simple, clothing, and you have this like glamour makeup, like they should be in a, some kind of gown. But that comes to managing, right? A big part of being a photographer commercially is managing a crew and like having, controlling it, the kind of being the boss, is what I say. Like one thing I loved at first and then didn't like later on about doing like big catalog shoots was that exactly that. The photos were nothing. Like everything else was like me running around organizing the prop builders and getting the catering, getting all the assistants in this, and you just then it's like, oh, gotta shoot. Blah, blah, okay, next. It was like it became this production, which is really awesome when you just see like all the sets being built around you and stuff. But after a while, it's like, well, I'm not really shooting anymore, like creatively. So sometimes it's nice just to grab the model and like go into an alley somewhere and shoot with the light that's bouncing off a building and just create something really raw and simple.
I used to work for Amazon, right? And not going to get into all that again right now. But at one point, I visited their. I don't think I've told you this before, actually. I visited their photo studios for where they photograph all the basically product for Amazon, but primarily for the Amazon fashion sort of side of things. And so went there, and they were in the middle of a shoot at that time, and I thought, okay, I'm just looking around at the time. At that point, I wasn't totally au fait with what was going on and the technical aspects of things right at that moment.
Did you say au fait?
I did. I did.
Au fait.
That's right. That's right. Look it up.
I will.
Write that down. And but I remember thinking to myself, oh, okay, so you bring them in, take a shot, turn them around, take a shot, turn around, take another shot, redo that one, redo that, and they're gone. And someone else walks in, some other clothing. I was already bored by that point.
Yeah.
And these guys, I think, oh yeah, I'd love to shoot for. No, why? Why would you want to do that? All they've done, they've literally set up a conveyor belt in exactly this. Nothing changes at any point. It's all fixed. Nothing changes. They walk them in, they set up, and they shoot. And it's only now I remember. I remember what you said to me just not that long ago about school photographers.
No.
There's photographers that often go into schools and take school portraits and the year by year group and the whole school and that kind of stuff. That certainly over here, most of them just get trained to go right, set it to this, put that there, and take that shot. Not knocking those people who do that in any stretch. It's not what I would want to do because I'd be really, really bored. But that's how the Amazon fashion studios seemed. I'm sure there's a lot more to those guys, and I'd love to go back today.
Yeah, I think that ultimately we've seen this crop up, and I mean, obviously Amazon's a big example of it, but I even I would say 10, 15 years ago, I went to the studio down in New Jersey, so pretty close, where they were doing exactly the same thing, but for brands that they put on their own websites, like Calvin Klein and the stuff. And it was like, oh, we need a photographer to shoot Calvin Klein. And I went down there, and it was like literally just a big warehouse where it was already set up and on white. And it was like, huh? And I mean, they contracted me, so I went in for the day, and I was just like, okay. I was like, this is not, and I'm like, but I think this is going to be the future because it's cheaper for companies. Everything's on the web. It used to be, I'll be the old man, right? Like I lived in Miami for a long time, which was like a location, people would come down to shoot because they'd want to shoot this stuff on location in Miami in cool places. And now people want it on white because it's all on the web, it's not being printed in these beautiful catalogs anymore. So now you have probably more photography being done, but it's all on white. So it's kind of simple stuff. And then for the bigger shots, they spend money. So probably for the cover, right? They go somewhere and I'd be curious. Well, there's no cover on Amazon, but probably for like the cover of the whatever the what you call that, the bar picture they put across the top. That might have something more elaborate. Yeah.
And they Amazon had the biggest problem for the longest time with their clothing lines and not doing very well, basically, because of how it was being presented online. And what it's like. Maybe not UK, but
do they sell denim? So I need to know.
But buying clothes online is really difficult because it's a physical thing. It's not like buying a piece of tech or a notepad or something like that. You pretty much know exactly what you're going to get with that. But clothing, it's very, very particular to the person in the way it looks, the way it feels, and in particular the way it fits.
Is it?
Yes, for most people. Okay, yes, most people. But you can't. That's very difficult to portray online, and Amazon got it wrong for the longest time until they started looking at what other companies were doing, who were apparently being quite successful with it, and they took that and tried to start running with it. But anyway, there you go. That's my Amazon bashing for today.
It's interesting. I actually didn't know that Amazon had their own line of clothing. So now I've learned something.
I'm not sure if it's actually their own line of clothing as such.
But certainly
they'd have orange on it, wouldn't they?
Well, I mean,
all their Amazon Basics, wouldn't
certainly,
they?
I think they distribute. Well, I think they do have Amazon Basic clothing. I'm not sure, but
they might. Yeah,
but it certainly distribute brands that you wouldn't be able to find anywhere else.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
But they do the photography for it rather than having photographs come from the brands themselves. The stuff
Right.
that
That makes sense. Yeah. So it's cheaper. It's similar to what I was talking about. It's a really interesting business model. It definitely changes the dynamic.
Yeah.
It makes photography cheaper so that you can have more of it. So I guess that works. Yeah. And, honestly, for what they were paying, it wasn't like it was terrible money, but I worked for one day there and I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't do this because this is just terrible, boring,
Yeah.
But, whatever. It is what it is. Everybody likes different things,
Totally.
So what's your main focus at the moment? Because I know, your studio is in the middle of Manhattan, which must be excruciatingly expensive. I'm just thinking.
Yeah. It's not inexpensive. Yeah. Well, I mean, what we do now is, so when I first got in that studio, which was probably like 12 years ago, it was Paul, my studio mate, he's a food photographer primarily. He and another guy were sharing it, who was an architectural photographer. So neither one shot there. So they brought me in. So there was just three of us. So there was, we were always splitting the rent from the beginning. And, but then over time, because I started doing more stuff with Adorama and I wasn't there all the time, we brought in more people. So we actually have 5 people and we have a Google Calendar. So it's not bad. I mean, we split the rent. So,
cool.
Yeah, I mean, I primarily now produce videos out of there. I don't shoot as much as I used to. Don't really, I mean, COVID obviously put a big dent in that. A lot of times too, if somebody comes through with a project, because I produce videos, I might even say to them, hey, okay, I'll do your project. Can I make a video from it? And, I'll give you a discount or do it for free, or depending on what it is. So I don't do so much commercial photography as I used to. Only once in a while, if something comes up, a client or whatever, I'll shoot something. But, which is kind of freeing because I can shoot what I want, as long as I'm producing the content. It's a very different way of working because I was always what I was called an assignment photographer. Like I never went out and just shot stock, let's say, when people were doing that early. I was always like somebody would call me and I would go do a job that they hired me for that I'd bid on. Now I do a lot more stuff where I produce my own work and, put it out there and that's it. So it's pretty cool. I mean, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now. We'll see. I mean, yes, the Manhattan studio is not cheap, but I would have to change the opening to all my videos if I didn't have Studio Manhattan. So
yeah.
Right. Once you have that tagline, you got to keep it there.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. But I guess, I mean, the ability to produce videos actually, especially during COVID, that must have been such a massive advantage for you because in a sense, it meant that you could carry on working despite the fact that everything was shutting down, right?
Yeah, I was very lucky. I did not really. I mean, yes, there was photo shoots that I could have done that I didn't do, and there was conventions I was supposed to teach at. But for the most part, my primary income, which is doing the videos for Adorama and for my channel, that did not get a dent from COVID. So I was very lucky. So
I think what the last 18 months has hopefully taught many freelancers in particular that actually having multiple different types of income stream is a positive thing to do. Had you not been involved with doing Adorama and the videos that you do, you may well have been there with very, very little to have been, to providing some kind of income over the last 18 months. And most people were in that situation, right? But you've had the foresight over the years to have different areas of income that you can pull on. And it's just more important than ever now, more important than ever. I lost the majority of my income over COVID, but I had some other employed work that I do with teaching that it paid for something every month, but not a huge amount. Yes. But it was something that was always coming in, right? And I set out with that belief. When I started doing that was the right thing for me to do at this stage, and I'm thankful that I did. Very, very thankful. Although it meant that I got no support from the government.
Yeah, that was a bit of a weird one over here.
Yes, everyone else got support from the government. I didn't.
Yeah,
not bitter about that at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, some of the guys I share my space with that were like, that shoot like portraits for LinkedIn and that kind of stuff. Like they were hurting a lot,
Yeah.
because obviously they have the overhead of the studio and no work coming in, and you couldn't work. You weren't really allowed to,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
but
that's cleaned up.
We could have sat there and wallowed in it, and we probably did for a short time. But
about 3 weeks.
Give us 3 or 4 weeks. Picked ourselves up. Thought, right, sod this. I'm not going to sit here and let this make us just miserable and broke. We're going to go broke anyway, but let's do something positive about it and build ourselves back for when we are allowed to get back out there. That's exactly what we've tried to do, right? And it's to do things that are positive and move towards future.
No, I think that's the right way to be always, and I think you're right. You need to diversify, and that's something I never did when I was younger. So do it now, kids. C3 for the kids.
That's free. Look at that.
Yeah, I mean, this is of course a long time ago now, almost I guess 20 years ago now. But when the terrorist attack happened in 9/11, I was living in Florida, and that day, I mean, people lost a lot, obviously, way more than me. I'm not going to try that, but I mean, I lost everything in as far as work, because all my work involved traveling and people coming to Miami to shoot catalogs. So I had like $60,000-$70,000 worth of jobs lined up that just all got canceled. And I was just like, and nobody traveled for, I don't know, a year. Like people just stopped going there. And that made me realize, oh yeah, if my whole income, even if it's a good income, is just based on this, I'm going to be in trouble, So that definitely taught me I scrambled, of course, and I started shooting other things and I just switched up. I started doing portraits and stuff locally, which is another reason why I did portraits. And, made it, obviously. I'm still here. So, but that's what happens, right? Sometimes something needs to hit you where you realize, oh, okay, I better be diverse. Because a lot of times we don't think about that, because you do want to be, it's hard because when you're trying to make it as a photographer or a filmmaker, you need to be single-minded, right? You have to focus on it so much because it's not easy, but you also have to think about more than just that. And I think diversifying within the industry is the smart way versus, what your dad will tell you, which is get a business degree just in case you want to go work in an office. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that, but I can do this, I can make a podcast, or I can do videos on YouTube, or I can, whatever, teach people however you want to do it.
Yeah. Don't work in an office, kids. No, I'm joking. Go if you want to do it, go do that.
Wow.
If that's your dream job, then just go and do that. That's fine.
I loved it for the longest time.
Somebody has to, right?
Well, love is a very strong word for it.
Yeah, it's kind of a loose definition, I guess.
Yeah. I accepted it and enjoyed it at times for long. I met a lot of great people working there. That's what I love most about it.
Really?
The people that I met, many of them today I still know and talk to regularly. Loved it. Made a lot of good friends there.
There's positive things. Yeah, I always just kind of thought the idea either working most of the year and then having a couple weeks vacation to do what you want was kind of weird. So I just figured I would, even if I didn't make as much money, I would just always do what I wanted to do, always. And that's why I figure working for yourself, I mean, it's work, but I do what I want to do,
Yeah.
So that's in the end matters. Now, when I'm living in the street, you guys see me, throw me $1.
Well, just go on Craigslist and there might be a little note from us.
Exactly. I'm definitely going to go on Craigslist. Oh, man. Yeah. But no, I think it's important to not, and you're right, we don't want just people that work in office. Obviously, working in an office can be fun. And for a while, actually, when I was at Adorama, besides doing the videos, I was the creative director. So I had a desk and stuff, and it was fun. I mean, like you said, you meet a lot of great people. I interacted with tons of awesome people, and so it's good.
Yeah.
Not as good as this, but
No. For us, right?
We're living the life right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's I have these conversations a lot with my kids. Generally, in the sense that they're at the point where they're going to have to make some decisions as to what they're going to do in the future, and I'm the last person to tell them to go for the safe bet, if you know what I mean. Because I do think you got to follow your dreams, but the one thing I always stress is that, I studied music originally, and I set up my first business when I was in my 20s. And the thing I realized very quickly was that, knowing how to play the guitar fairly well doesn't mean that you know how to run a business at all. And that was a steep learning curve at the time. And inevitably, I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I learned from them. And there were several occasions where I had to pick myself back up, dust myself off, and just get on with it, and overcome X amount of different problems. And in a sense, it's not too dissimilar from a photo shoot, where it's the same sort of thing. You have to overcome issues all the time. You just have to press on until you get what you set out to get in the first place. But being an artist, and again, regardless as to whether you're an actor or a painter or a photographer or a musician or whatever it is, there's always this element of like, well, you're going to have to make a living with that somehow, and that does require other skills other than just your acting skills or whatever. And so it's not a bad idea to enhance your knowledge in that respect.
I agree, and I think one of the, well, I mean, I don't know, at least the education system that I went through, when I was in college, you could take business classes, but business classes taught you how to work in an office, like they didn't teach you how to start a business. So yeah, you learned kind of accounting and stuff, but not in the way that you would need to run it for a small business. So I think what people need if they want to run a business is to do that. They need to take either like workshops or, those kind of things on how to run a small business, not business classes in college that teach you like how to, work for Amazon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and again, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you're trying to start a business, there's a lot of things you don't know, right? Like I didn't know a lot. I screwed up a lot, early on. I probably still do.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. When I studied music, there was nothing. There were elements that covered things like just music industry related subjects, but there wasn't anything that taught you how to run a small business. How to file your taxes, and all of the kind of stuff, the nitty gritty stuff that's actually really important. When you run a small business, like
how to get clients.
Well, how to get clients,
how to make a budget,
Budget. Yeah, exactly. How to budget and all that kind of stuff. There's so many things that you have to figure out when you're, when you started going to business, and whether that's working with others and have, setting up a business where you employ other people, or whether it's a matter of just being a sole trader, basically, being self-employed and actually, making it work that way.
No, I think that's one reason why if you're a photographer, if you can be a photo assistant, that's another thing you can learn. Photographers that I worked for enough, that felt comfortable talking. And not every, the first day you worked for them, they start giving you business advice, but they would kind of, you can ask them questions like, how do you do a budget? Can I see one of these budgets? That kind of stuff. Because how do you figure out like how much you should charge? Like that kind of stuff. That stuff you can't really learn in school per se, right? You got to kind of learn it in the industry, and you make connections. You work with groups of people that are your peers. That's how you figure that stuff out. But of course, I didn't know that because they didn't teach us that in school to do that. Time for me to figure that out. I have to go out and I read some books. I mean, there's lots of books about that kind of stuff, which is good.
Is that when how much you should charge is probably the most elemental question when you run any business.
And also the hardest one to answer for people when they ask, because exactly. I don't know what you should charge.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, enough. And also sometimes people don't understand. Like they'll look at it and be like, okay, I want to make $50,000. So, and I can do one photo shoot a week. So I'm going to charge $1,000 a photo shoot. It's like, no, you're not going to make $50,000. You got insurance, you got costs, you got transportation, you got studio. It's like, no, that is not that. You need to take all that on top of what you want to make. Taxes are going to come out of that, all this other stuff. So yeah, that's the stuff people don't think of, like that kind of stuff. And I don't feel like they taught us that in school. I took some business classes, but I was like, this is not teaching me what I want. So I did something else. I was like, no, no, thanks. And I just learned by reading books and by talking to other photographers and making lots of mistakes, screwing up tremendously, doing jobs where I made like almost nothing because I screwed up all the budgeting, but you learn.
I've done jobs where I've lost money.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, but it's a learning experience. And
you
tried to not do it.
Didn't get it quite right. Didn't get the timings right. Get whatever it might have been that caused that. You learn from that, and you won't do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. If you run too close to the wire and something screws up and you have to redo something, immediately you're in the red.
Mm-hmm.
That just happens. So.
Right. And you got to like factor in things. Like I remember I was doing this, of course I was ready for it because now I've learned. I factor in an extra 10% whenever I would do these catalogs as insurance. And we shot this whole catalog, and 2 days later, when the client they sent off to the separators, they were like, we don't have dress number, blah, 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 blah. You must not have given it to us, the files, it was digital. So I was like, went through my files, didn't have it. Turns out the stylist screwed up, right? So fashion stylist screws up, but whose fault is that, right? It's on the photographer, it's your shoot, right? So now there was a set that was built, there was big studios we shot in, all these other things. It's like, it's going to cost me, $10,000 to shoot one thing, Mm-hmm. So luckily they were a cool regular client I always had. So we talked a bit, and I had shots of the set separately. So we talked, I said, I think I can shoot this model on a white background, and I will actually do the retouching and drop her in. It won't be as perfect, but I'll get it as close as possible. And, it's not going to cost you a penny. I'm just going to do it. Just send me the dress. And that's what we did. Like I did it in my small studio. I hired the model again, but because I had that insurance, it basically covered it. And the other 3 times I shot for them that they didn't use the insurance, I had put that money away for exactly this moment, where like, you don't just take that as, it's extra profit. No, that's like the insurance for when you screw up, It's like it goes into a separate account for my oops. And at the end of the year, if you don't screw up at all or things don't happen, then you have that extra cash flow.
Yeah.
Which I would then use to buy equipment. That's how I kind of did it. But like, I didn't know to do that until I worked for a photographer, and they wrote that on there. And I was like, oh, you charge people for that? He was like, yeah, because what if this happens? They're not going to be like, okay, we'll pay you again to shoot it. They're going to expect you to just do it, or you lose that client,
What a cracking bit of advice right there.
There you go.
Really is. Really is. And is that like is that literally a line item to the client as well?
Insurance.
As insurance?
Yeah, I put it on the invoice. Insurance too.
Love it.
And then they ask, I say, well, this ensures that the shoot that we get all the shots, and if something happens, that we'll reshoot if we need to.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. I mean, it's not enough to. I mean, you'll still lose it if you have to reshoot the whole thing. But it's really specifically for something like that. Files corrupted, film gets destroyed. Back in the day of that, something didn't get shot. I mean, it would have been easy for me to be like, well, it wasn't my fault. The thing didn't do that. And of course, the client too had their rep there who was checking off each dress as we shot it. They didn't notice it. But, this client was a big source of income for me. It's like, I'm going to argue with them. No, I'm just going to shoot it and make them happy. And, luckily I did those things. I shot the set with nobody on it. I knew how I shot the model, that I could reproduce it. These are the things that you do. I drew diagrams, that's the commercial aspect, right?
I think our fees have just gone up by 10%.
Yeah, just drop it on the insurance. Yeah.
It's such a
and it also covers the insurance. Yeah. Well, and also I use it to pay my insurance as far as liability as well. Also, because usually big jobs like that fall on my liability insurance. So like if somebody falls and breaks their neck or whatever, again they're going to sue the photographer, not the client. Usually, in that case, not always. Depends on who's hiring. Yeah.
So, what are your plans for the rest of 2021 and the next few years?
For the rest of the year, so as I mentioned, I'm doing those Friday videos. I'm going to continue the series with Marissa. My plan for 2020, which is now will be 2022, is we're planning on going on the road. That was a big thing. I'd already pitched it to Adorama. They seemed to they gave me the soft approval. Basically, what I'm going to do is get in the car with Marissa probably or some other model. Maybe we'll switch it up, and I'm going to drive around to these various like all across the U.S. There's these bizarre things like giant, dinosaurs at gas stations and things that used to be on the long like Route 66 and stuff to get people to stop. So there's all over the country, there's these weird local things. So my plan was to go around to each of these things and do photo shoots at them and kind of document it. So I was going to do that in 2020. And then of course, 2020 was the thing. And then, so I figured 2022, we should be hopefully all good for that. So that's my 2022 plans. 2020, I'm going to keep 2021 where we are right now. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I do, regular video every other week for Adorama on Tuesdays. Then I do my live streams twice a month for them. On my channel, I'm doing those Fridays, short videos with the occasional longer porch video, and the show with Marissa. I don't have any like personal photo projects I'm working on right now, but you never know when those things are going to crop up. So who knows?
Are you going to come on? You going to travel to the EU at any point?
To the UK?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Specifically to the UK. Yeah, specifically to the UK.
We listen to you anymore.
Well, it's not difficult to get there.
Well, that is very true.
Yeah, I mean, that actually was planned. I was planning on going there to. I don't know if you guys know. I mean, everybody knows Gavin Hoey. You must know Gavin.
Yeah.
So Gavin's out there, and I'm like, Gavin, I'm gonna come bother you. So we're definitely gonna try to come out and hang out with Gavin. He's super cool, great guy. He's out there, and also I am my family. So I'm only, I guess I'm second generation settlers. My parents were born here. The rest of my family is from Ireland. So I'm actually working on getting Irish citizenship, so I can spend more time over there. So I'll probably be over end of this year, beginning of next year. Yeah. So that'll be fun.
Oh, wicked. Right. Yeah. Well, we know where all the good pubs are.
Perfect.
100%.
Does your recording system work? We'll bring it into the pub. And...
what a cracking idea.
Absolutely.
There you go.
A whole bunch of ideas for videos, for sure. That'd be awesome. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was an absolute education and some really, really good tips. So
specifically for tips for kids, I think we said.
Yes.
Yeah. Craigslist.
Stay away. Cool. So again, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today. And that was Camera Shake Podcast, episode 61. And of course, before you go away, remember, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, make sure you head over to YouTube, youtube.com/Camera Shake. Check us out there, where you can not only listen to our sultry voices, but also see us in full Technicolor. And remember to hit that follow button and hit the bell and all of that kind of jazz. That'd be super awesome. Leave us a comment. By the way, if you are listening to this podcast from South Africa, if that is you, get in touch, because we really want to know, find out where you are when you're listening to us. Other than that, we'll see you again next week for episode 62.